All right, solving equations by multiplication and division. Not only is this video going to be a review, but we did another video yesterday with almost the identical steps. So today we're going to be moving a little bit fast. If you need to slow down the video, if you need to pause, write things down, or rewind and listen again, make sure you take the time to do that. But we're solving equations, meaning we're trying to get the variable by itself. Example 1, we have x divided by 5. And a lot of you have forgotten that this fraction bar, that line means divide. So x divided by 5 equals negative 12. And I rewrote example 2 so that it's negative 8x equals 128. We're going to get rid of that rational number, that fraction for now. It's going to sneak up on us here in a couple of weeks. So step 1, just like the last video, we're going to draw railroad tracks on each side of the equal sign. So we're going to draw our railroad tracks on each side of the equal sign. Now what that looks like, railroad tracks, I guess. Step 2, circle the variable and anything attached to it. Hopefully this sounds familiar. Hopefully this is just a review of what you saw yesterday. Remember not to forget, don't forget the sign when we do that. So in example 1, x over 5, x divided by 5, that's our variable, and we're going to circle what's attached to it, meaning the divided by 5. In example 2, x is attached to a negative 8. X is attached to a negative 8. And I know circling this doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but starting tomorrow, this step is going to help you solve your equations a lot easier. And we're just going to get in the habit of it right now from the very beginning. So we've circled our variable, we've got our railroad tracks drawn. Step 3 is to get the variable. We want to get the variable or the letter by itself by using inverse or opposite operations. Now remember, whatever you do to one side, you must do to the other. Now one thing we want to remind you with multiplying and dividing is we're not changing the sign. So do not change the sign of the number, just the operation. Meaning negatives are still negatives. All we're changing is division to multiplication. So for example 1, we have x divided by 5. And we want to do the inverse of dividing by 5, which is multiplying by 5. So I'm going to multiply the left side by 5, and I'm going to multiply the right side by 5. And when I do 5 times x and then divide by 5, my 5's cancel. And all I'm left with is x, which is equal to negative 12 times 5. I can do that in my head, but we're going to practice with our calculator. Negative 12 times 5 is negative 60. So my answer, x is equal to negative 60. I think that x is equal to negative 60. If you remember yesterday, we spent a lot of time checking our work, which is our step 5 down here. Step 5 says to check your solution. And we'll come back to step 4 here in just a minute. So to check my solution, I'm going to take what I think x is, and I'm going to plug it back in. So instead of x divided by 5, I'm going to put negative 60 divided by 5. And I want to see if that is equal to negative 12. So my calculator, I do negative 60 divided by 5, hit enter, and indeed I get negative 12. So I know that I did my math correct. This side's negative 12. This side's negative 12, which is what I wanted. So my answer is x is equal to negative 60. Now we're going to finish those same steps on example 2. We have negative 8 times x equals 128. So since I'm multiplying, the opposite, the inverse of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide this side by negative 8. Remember not to change the negative sign, just the multiplication, which means I also have to divide the right side by negative 8. So when I do that on the left, Negative 8 times x divided by negative 8 simplifies to just be x is equal to 128 divided by negative 8. Now I'm going to be really careful when I do this division that I use my negative sign. 128 divided by negative 8, not by just 8. When I hit enter, I think that x is equal to negative 16. But I want to double check my work. I want to make sure that I did it correct. So instead of x, I'm going to rewrite my equation, negative 8 times negative 16, and I want to see if that equals 128. So negative 8 times negative 16, when I hit enter I get 128, so I did my work right. So x is equal to negative 16. I'm confident in that answer because I checked it. Step 4 down here, we skipped just a little bit. We've already done this, but we're solving for the variable. That means we're getting the variable by itself. We're getting it alone. Now, moving down here to together. We want to be careful on a few of these. We ran into some problems yesterday when we were dealing with variables on the right side. So I have some examples in here again so that we can practice avoiding those mistakes. But we're going to start right here with number 1, and we're going to follow those steps. Negative 5 times t equals negative 45. I'm going to draw my railroad tracks. And since I'm timesing by negative 5, the inverse of that is to divide by negative 5. So I need to do that on the left, and I need to do that on the right. So on the left, my negative 5's cancel out, and I'm left with t is equal to negative 45. I'm going to be careful that I include that negative sign. Divided by negative 5 should equal 9. I think it's equal to 9, so let's plug it in and try. Negative 5 times 9, we want to know if that's equal to 45. So my calculator, once again, I put in negative 5, I times that by 9 instead of t, and I get negative 45 like I wanted. So we're confident in our answer for number 1. We're going to move on to number 2. K divided by negative 3 is equal to 9. So I draw my railroad tracks, and I'm going to circle my variable. I skipped that step on number 1. See what happens when you're not reading steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. We don't want to forget to do that. I apologize, but we're going to get in that habit. I'll try to remember to remind you to get in that habit. So k divided by negative 3. That negative 3 is attached to the k. And since we're dividing by negative 3, the inverse of that is to multiply by negative 3. And that means I need to multiply my right-hand side by negative 3. So k divided by negative 3 times negative 3 cancels out, and I'm just left with k is equal to 9 times negative 3. Now 9 times 3, I can do that in my head. That's 27. And a positive times a negative is a negative. So k would be negative 27. I think, let's plug it in. Instead of k divided by negative 3, I'm going to put in negative 27 divided by negative 3, and I'm going to see what I get. I hope I get 9. Negative 27 divided by negative 3 gives me 9. So I'm confident my answer is correct. K is equal to negative 27. Now 3 and 4. Here's where we need to be a little bit careful. We've got a couple of funny things going on. In number 3, I've got negative 10 equals negative b divided by 4. The first thing I want to be careful of is that my variable's on the right-hand side, and that confused some of you in the last video. We do everything that we do. If it's on the left-hand side, we're trying to move everything away from the b. So I'm not trying to move my negative 10 to the right, because that gets it closer to b. I want to get rid of this divide by 4. The other thing we need to be careful of is this negative in front. We don't really like it out in front because we want to get rid of it. When we're done, we just want to be left with a b. So I'm going to rewrite this problem as negative 10 is equal to b, and that negative sign I'm going to move to the bottom so that it's with my 4. b divided by negative 4. and then I draw my railroad tracks after I circle my b divided by -4. And since I'm dividing by -4, the inverse of that is to times by -4, which means I need to also times my left-hand side by -4. So on the right-hand side, I divide by -4, I times by -4, those cancel, and all I'm left with is a b and an equal sign. On the left-hand side, I've got -4 times -10. Now, negative times a negative is a positive. 4 times 10 is 40. So my answer, I think, is going to be a positive 40. And that's equal to b, which is the same thing as saying b is equal to 40. So we're going to plug that in, see if we got it right. We want -10 to be equal to negative b, which is 40, divided by 4. 40 divided by 4, that's 10. And this negative sign out in front makes it a -10. So my answer is correct. I'm confident in my answer. All right, number 4, -72 equals 8d. Again, my variable's on the right. This time, let's change the equation so that the variable's on the left. -72 equaling 8d. Instead, I can just say that 8d is equal to -72. So I'm flipping the entire equation around. Now I draw my railroad tracks. I circle my variable and everything that's attached to it. And right now I've got 8 times d. So to undo timesing by 8, I have to divide by 8. If I do it to the left, I do it to the right. These 8's cancel out, and all I'm left with is a d, and that equals -72 divided by 8. Maybe I'm not very comfortable with my 8's, so I'm going to put that in my calculator. -72 divided by 8, and it tells me that it should be a -9. So d is equal to -9. I feel pretty good about that answer, but I'm going to plug it in to make sure. So I want -72 to equal 8 times d, which I think is -9. So in my calculator, let's try it. 8 times -9 gives me -72. So -72 on the left, -72 on the right, which is what I wanted, and I can feel good about my work. I can turn this in and know that I've got all the answers correct. All right, so you've got 4 problems that I want you to try. When you're finished, bring them up to me. We'll talk about getting you the work for the day. A few things to be careful of on these. You've got a lot of negative signs, so when you multiply and divide, make sure you keep those negatives and just change which operation you're using. You've got a few problems where the variable's on the right. If you want to solve it like we did number 3, leave the variable on the right, go for it. If you're not comfortable with that, just switch the entire equation so that this right-hand side becomes the left-hand side and vice versa. Either way, it works for me. Good luck to you. If you have any problems, let us know.